My name is Daniel Marsh, and the year I turned 23, I took a job that most people in my town wouldn't touch. Overnight security at Harrowfield Cemetery, a patch of land on the outskirts of Millbrook, Tennessee, where the oldest graves dated back to the Civil War. The reason was simple. I needed the money and the night shifts paid well. I didn't have many expectations going in. I figured it would be quiet work. Just me, the dark, and a lot of old headstones. I had no idea what I was walking into. Harrowfield was old in the way that gets under your skin. Most of the markers in the back section were so weathered you couldn't read the names anymore. Moss had swallowed the stone on half of them. Some had sunk at angles into the earth, like whatever was underneath had shifted and pulled them down. There was something solemn about the place, melancholy almost, but nothing that made me uncomfortable. Not at first. My first shift started on a cold October evening, just as the sun dropped behind the tree line and the sky went dark fast. The outgoing guard, a weathered man named Roy who looked like he'd seen things he wasn't going to explain, handed me a flashlight and gave me one piece of advice. "Don't leave the grounds," he said, "and keep your eyes open. This place has a history." I nodded like I understood. I didn't take it seriously. The first part of that night was quiet. I sat in the small gatehouse near the entrance, 2 lanterns going, watching the cemetery through the window. The place felt peaceful under the moonlight. Rows of headstones casting long, thin shadows across the grass. Wind moving through the old oak trees along the perimeter. Peaceful until around 2 in the morning. That's when I heard it. A sound. Low, almost beneath hearing, like footsteps moving through dry leaves somewhere between the graves. I looked out. Nothing. I told myself it was an animal, a fox maybe, or a stray dog cutting through the grounds. But the silence that followed felt wrong, heavy, like the air itself was holding its breath. I got up and walked the grounds to shake the feeling, took my flashlight and moved toward the oldest section, the part of Harrowfield where the markers had no readable names, where the plots were so close together there was barely room to walk between them. At the end of one of the rows, I saw a shadow move. It was slow, deliberate. My first instinct was that it was another guard, or maybe a late visitor. It happens even at night, but as I moved toward it, the shape dissolved, not walked away, not stepped behind a stone. Dissolved into nothing. I stopped walking. My heart was going faster than I wanted to admit. I stood there in the dark telling myself it was fog, or exhaustion, or the way the flashlight played tricks on uneven ground. I went back to the gatehouse. I convinced myself I'd imagined it. The next day, one of the older groundskeepers told me about the Calloway family. It was an old story, the kind that gets passed around in small towns until nobody's sure anymore what's legend and what actually happened. The Calloways had been a large family, well known in Millbrook going back generations. Sometime in the late 1800s, the entire family died within a single week. The cause was never officially recorded. They were buried together in an isolated corner of Harrowfield, away from the other plots, in a section that the groundskeeper still referred to quietly as the Calloway ground. Some people said that on the darkest nights they walked. I thought it was a good story, nothing more. That same night the sounds came back, but this time it wasn't just footsteps in the leaves. This time I heard something heavier. A weight moving deliberately through the cemetery, slow and patient, like something that wasn't in a hurry because it knew I wasn't going anywhere. I took my flashlight and went out. I moved down the center path toward the back of the grounds, and at the end of the row, the same spot as the night before, the shadow was there again. This time, it didn't dissolve. It stood perfectly still, facing me, and it stayed. A cold sweat broke across the back of my neck. Something about the stillness of it was worse than movement would have been. I kept walking toward it, slowly, telling myself it was a person, a trespasser, someone I needed to deal with. My flashlight beam didn't reach it fully. The shape absorbed the light instead of reflecting it. Then it turned and moved toward the old Callaway mausoleum at the far end of the grounds. I followed it. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to know. Maybe some part of me still believed there was a rational explanation waiting on the other side. When I reached the mausoleum, the figure was gone. The air around the structure was several degrees colder than the rest of the cemetery. My flashlight began to flicker, and then I felt it. A pressure against my chest, like two hands pushing inward without touching me. My lungs tightened. My thoughts went scattered and strange. I turned and walked back fast, not quite running, not yet. But before I reached the gatehouse path, I heard it, right at my ear, close enough that I felt the air move. "Help us." I stopped dead, turned a full circle. Nobody. The voice came again, louder this time, and from everywhere at once, rising up from the ground itself like it had always been, just beneath the surface, waiting to get out. I ran. I hit the gatehouse door at full speed and stopped cold. The door was open. I always locked it behind me, always. Inside, standing in the center of the small room, was a woman in a white dress. Her face was covered by a veil so dense I couldn't see her features through it. She wasn't moving. She was just standing there, in my space, in the place I'd told myself was safe. I couldn't move. I stood in the doorway watching her as she began, very slowly, to turn toward me. Then the wind came, sudden and total, extinguishing both lanterns at once. Complete darkness. I felt her close. I don't know how else to describe it. A presence so immediate it was like standing next to an open freezer in a dark room. I knew she was within arm's reach. And then a sound tore through the cemetery that I will never forget for the rest of my life. A scream. But wrong, layered, like dozens of voices collapsing into a single sound, rising from every corner of the grounds at once. I ran for the front gate, didn't stop, didn't look back, hit the latch, shoved through, and kept moving until I was on the road outside with gravel under my feet and the cemetery fence behind me. Then I looked back. Through the fog, along the fence line, I could see them. Shapes, standing still at intervals along the perimeter, watching me from inside the grounds. The same shadows I'd seen all night, waiting, not following, just watching me go. I quit that morning, called Roy, left a message, never went back to collect my last check. Years later, I heard that Harrowfield had been closed, officially decommissioned, the county citing structural instability in several of the older sections. But the people in Millbrook who knew the place said that wasn't the real reason. They said the real reason was that the guards kept leaving, that nobody who worked the night shift there made it past the first month without walking off the job, that the stories never stopped. I believe them. I still think about those nights, about the shape that dissolved and came back, about the voice at my ear, about the woman in white standing in the one place I thought I was safe. Sometimes I tell myself there's an explanation I just haven't found yet, but I know what I heard, I know what I saw. And sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and I can't sleep, I hear it again, faint, distant, like it's coming up through the floor from somewhere far below. Help us. And I wonder if they found what they were looking for, or if they're still there in the dark at Harrowfield, waiting for the next person who needs the money badly enough to say yes. My name is Marcus Webb, and for almost 2 years I worked the night shift as a control room operator at the Harlan Falls hydroelectric station, a facility built into the side of a mountain valley in rural West Virginia, accessible only by a single-lane road that switch back through the dark for 11 miles before you reach the gate. Most people who drove that road for the first time didn't come back for a second shift. I thought they were weak. I thought it was just a road. My shift ran 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., just me in the main control room, monitoring pressure levels, gate positions, water flow, the kind of work that is almost entirely routine, almost entirely silent, broken only by the hum of the monitors and the occasional automated alert from the system. The station smelled like wet concrete and cold metal. The walls were thick. Sound didn't travel the way it should. Nothing unusual, until it was. The first time something felt wrong was a night in late November when fog had filled the valley so completely that the exterior cameras showed nothing but white. I was at my station with a cup of coffee, running through the nightly flow charts when the lights in the hallway outside began to flicker. I didn't think much of it. Moisture played havoc with the electrical systems out there, but seconds later the camera covering the maintenance tunnel went completely black. No error code, no system flag, just nothing, like something had covered the lens. I took my flashlight and went to check. The maintenance tunnel runs behind a heavy metal door at the end of the main corridor. The door always felt wrong to touch. Colder than everything else, even in summer, I pushed through and moved in with the light held forward. The tunnel was empty. At least it looked that way. The silence was different in there, not the normal silence of the early morning hours. Something denser, like the space itself, was holding still on purpose. I moved further in. Then I heard it, a dragging sound, like something being pulled slowly across concrete, and it wasn't coming from in front of me. It was coming from behind. I killed the flashlight and listened. The sound repeated. Slow, deliberate, patient. I turned and lit up the corridor behind me. At the entrance to the tunnel where the door stood open, a figure was there, tall, thin, standing completely still in the doorway, not entering, just occupying the space. The flashlight beam didn't illuminate it the way it should have. The edges of the shape were wrong, soft, dissolving, like it existed slightly outside the space it was standing in. It took one step toward me, no sound. I backed up, hit the door, shoved it closed, and drove the manual lock home. Then I ran back to the control room without looking behind me. When I got back, everything was normal. Lights stable, all cameras online, including the tunnel feed. Perfectly clear, perfectly empty, no sign of anything. I logged it as a momentary camera malfunction and finished my shift. But something had changed. I could feel it in the way I moved through the station after that. Careful, aware, like the building had quietly shifted its relationship with me while I wasn't paying attention. The following nights were calm on the surface, but the feeling didn't leave. A pressure, low and constant, like being observed from a direction you couldn't identify. Every camera showed normal, every reading was clean, and yet I started avoiding the maintenance tunnel entirely. There was no official reason to go in there. I didn't need one to stay out. Then, on a Tuesday night, about 3 weeks after the tunnel incident, an alert fired on my monitor. One of the lateral intake gates had been opened manually. That was impossible. Manual operation required physical access and my authorization. Neither had occurred. I went to the hydraulic control corridor, a long, narrow passage with thick windows, looking down into the underground channels. The sound of the water below was always present there, a low, constant rush. That night it sounded faster, higher pitched, like the flow had been disrupted. Nothing had been touched. No lever moved, no access panel disturbed. But the monitor still showed the gate open. Then I looked through the channel window. The figure was standing on one of the maintenance walkways over the water, more visible this time. The security lighting below gave it form. It wasn't moving. It stood with its arms at its sides, staring down at the water, and its shadow fell in the wrong direction. The light source was to its left. The shadow went left. I stepped back from the window. When I looked again, it was gone. I ran back to the control room. All cameras normal, one difference. Camera 06, the feed covering the main entrance, showed something new on the glass of the door, a marking drawn in something I couldn't identify. A human shape with arms extended and a circle in the chest, like a symbol, like a message I didn't have the language for. Around 4:30 in the morning, I heard tapping, faint at first. I assumed wind or debris outside, but it grew, rhythmic, getting closer, and it was coming from the service stairwell, the one that led down to the sub-level, where the original generator equipment had been mothballed for years, closed off, not sealed, just closed. Tack, tack, tack. Slow, descending, like footsteps coming down, one at a time. I took the flashlight and went down. I don't know why. I was past the point of waiting to find out. The uncertainty was worse than whatever was at the bottom of those stairs. The sublevel smelled like standing water and old iron. The tapping had stopped, and on the far wall, the oldest wall in the station, streaked with decades of moisture staining, something had been written, not painted, not marked with any tool I could identify. The letters were cut directly into the concrete, clean-edged, like they'd always been there and I'd simply never looked. "Marcus, you're already with us." I backed up and hit a pipe. The flashlight fell. In the half-second of darkness before it hit the ground, I heard breathing. Close, immediate, directly behind me. The kind of proximity that meant inches, not feet. When the light came back on, nothing was there. I went up those stairs faster than I have ever moved in my life. I locked myself in the control room, pulled the blinds on the exterior windows, sat in the chair and spent 20 minutes convincing myself that everything I had experienced over the past weeks had a rational source. Fatigue, isolation, the particular way that working alone in a closed facility at 3 in the morning warps your perception. I almost had myself convinced. Then the power went out. Everything, total black. The backup monitor flickered on. Battery-powered dim blue light in the darkness, and on the screen, a message I had never seen before, in no protocol I recognized. "Process complete. Welcome, Marcus." That message did not belong to any system in that building. I knew every automated routine, every scheduled output. That was not one of them. Then the landline rang. An old wall-mounted phone near the filing cabinet that I had assumed was decorative. Disconnected, forgotten. It rang. I picked it up. A voice, my own voice, whispering. "Why did you come back?" I hung up. Every camera in the building activated simultaneously. And what they showed were not current feeds. They showed recordings. Me over the past weeks. Asleep in the chair, walking the corridors, reviewing charts at the desk. And in every single frame, in every shot, somewhere in the background, a figure, sometimes facing away near a doorway, sometimes just a shadow caught in a window reflection. Always there, I had never noticed, not once. The last camera showed a live feed, the control room, me, sitting in the chair, staring at the monitor, and behind me, someone standing. I turned around. Nothing. I grabbed my bag and my keys and walked out of that building without shutting down a single system. I drove the 11 miles of Switchback Road in the dark with both hands on the wheel and didn't stop until the valley was behind me and the sky ahead had started to go gray at the edges. I never went back, not for my last paycheck, not for the things I left in my locker. 2 weeks later, a package arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside, a USB drive and a handwritten note on plain paper. "The night shift never ends, Marcus. I have never plugged in that drive. I never will. But some nights, when the clock hits 10 and the room gets quiet, I feel it again. That pressure, that sense of being observed from a direction that doesn't exist. And I find myself checking the corners of the room before I can stop myself, just to make sure the shadows are where they're supposed to be.